Sisters and brothers, let's have a conversation. Today, I would like to briefly talk about prayer and buses. I guess you are wondering what ties the two things together. Well, I have a short story for you, of which I'm sure we are all, well, the majority of us are familiar with. I have been very fortunate to live in and experience different countries and cultures. It sometimes amazes me how certain things are taken for granted when one moves from one country to another. Things like the norms, the cultures, and the attitudes of the peoples of those countries or places. I lived and visited several developed countries, and while there I frequently used the available public transport systems, particularly the buses, because I couldn't afford to have or own a car. I rode the bus a lot for short trips, long trips, within and across cities, on roads and bridges. All of them fairly uneventful trips, of which I am not complaining at all. On moving back home to Nigeria, I did the same. I couldn't afford a car as well, so I took the buses. But there was a difference this time around. And no, I am not talking about a lack of fancy double-decker buses or the prevalence and the unending sounds of bus conductors screaming to the extent to which their vocal cavities would permit. No, it was more of the experiences, a number of the experiences that characterized my daily commute. I remember I once had to make a trip to a location in Lagos Island. At the time, I believe I was leaving on the mainland. I had hopped on a Danfo bus. A Danfo bus is a public transportation in Lagos and privately owned buses. I hopped on the bus, I think somewhere in Olubiju, headed for the island. I remember thinking to myself, on seeing the condition of this bus that I was about to board, how this commute would be like playing a game of Russian roulette. In any case, I soldiered on, notwithstanding. After all, this is how we get around Lagos, right? This is what we do, at least for those of us who can own our own vehicles. I skillfully jumped into the bus while it was still in partial motion, right? You know, the bus driver not feeling the need to come to a stop, obviously aware of the hawkish and predatory traffic management officers nearby, those officers we call LASMA, looking for drivers to extort money from. In any case, we proceeded with the journey to the island, and you know the usual thing. It was a race against other buses, with the driver maneuvering his vehicle from the road to what felt like randomly placed stops to pick up and drop off passengers before the competition could do the same. We eventually got on the third mainland bridge. The third mainland bridge is the roughly 11-kilometer bridge that spans the Lagos Island and the mainland. It connects actually the Lagos Island to the mainland. Once we were on the bridge, at this point my heart started to palpitate, and instinctively I started to pray. So there goes the connection between buses and prayer. So I was praying, and it seemed like at any moment the bus was going to lose a wheel or perhaps a couple of tires or wheels and eventually plunge into the lagoon at the bottom of the bridge. So I also looked around in the bus, and it seemed like I was the only one in panic. Everyone else was numb to our predicament. Perhaps they were all smarter than I was and had said their prayers at home before stepping out to face the day. This is a norm, a tradition, typical in our society. I remember this experience every now and then, and also think about the number of avoidable accidents and loss of life that occurs in Lagos every day. I must admit, motor vehicle accidents are not the preserve of any one city, Lagos or London or New York or any country. However, many cities in the developed will put in place practical controls to limit and reduce the potential for injury and death during everyday commutes, especially with respect to public transportation, because there's a potential for legal liability, right? With the need for journey mercies and prayer are not factored in or is left only for much larger or much more complicated types of journeys, perhaps like going to the moon. A lot of us pray because we fear. We pray to the divine to rescue us from the things that we fear. We fear sickness, poverty, we fear to be alone, we fear lack, we fear injury, and we fear death. In most cases, perhaps for good reasons. For others, I would argue not so. Because we have failed to do all we can to remove the source of the fears. I'll give you an example. As a child, I used to be afraid of the dark. I would ask my older brother to go with me if I needed to go into a room that was poorly lit or was dark. I would beseech him, and oftentimes he would gratefully indulge me in my phobia. As an adult, I understand that fear of the dark in itself is irrational, and for whatever reason, if I were concerned about the dark, I know I can, with a flick of a switch, change or modify the environment around me. Similarly, as a people, it is within our ability to build a safer city and transportation infrastructure. The time, energies, and intellect spent on the study of ancient biblical text and the artful articulation of words of supplication to the divine could actually serve a higher purpose, a service to humanity in the here and now. And what I mean is, our default mode of operation should not be to outsource our responsibilities to the divine, but to do all we can to understand the physical characteristics of the universe that birthed us, and harness this knowledge to ensure that every woman, man, and child lives a life devoid of fears whose source we can switch off or modify as easily as I can turn on the light in a dark room. So, ladies and gentlemen, that's my story. I hope the point I've been trying to make in this story comes across clearly. And as always, share your thoughts, questions in the comment section below, and let's keep the conversation going. Thank you.